Mic check 1 2 1 2. Okay. We'll start off with headlines and then go into more specific stories.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Gooden. The Pentagon's announced the U.S. blew up another boat in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 people. The Pentagon claims the boat was carrying drugs, but once again offered no proof. The U.S. has now killed at least 87 people in 22 strikes on boats since September. This comes as controversy continues to grow over a September 2nd strike when the U.S. targeted and killed 2 men who'd survived an initial attack. 9 were killed in the first strike. On Thursday, members of Congress were shown video of 2 men being killed at a time when they were clinging to the side of their overturned boat for more than 40 minutes. Democratic Representative Jim Hines of Connecticut spoke after watching the video.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have 2 individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States.
Lawmakers also questioned Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley, the operations commanding officer. Many questions remain over Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's role. The Washington Post recently reported Hegseth had ordered Pentagon officials to kill everybody on the boat. This comes as the Pentagon's Inspector General has released its report examining Hegseth's sharing of sensitive information about U.S. strikes in Yemen on a Signal group chat earlier this year. The report found Hegseth's actions, quote, created a risk to operational security that could have resulted in failed U.S. mission objectives and potential harm to U.S. pilots, unquote. The report also criticized Hegseth's use of a personal cell phone to conduct official business. Hegseth himself.
Even the other Nazis don't like how you're being a Nazi.
refused to cooperate with the investigation, refusing to hand over his phone or sit for an interview. Israel's military is continuing to pound the Gaza Strip in violation of the October 10th ceasefire. Al Jazeera reports Israeli ships opened fire towards the coast of Khan Yunis while air raids struck the city of Rafah. There are reports of explosions and Israeli artillery fire around Gaza City, including airstrike near the Maghazi refugee camp. Meanwhile, a CNN investigation found the Israeli military fired indiscriminately at starving Palestinians collecting sacks of flour near an aid distribution site near the Zakim crossing in June, then bulldozed their bodies into shallow, unmarked graves, with some bodies left to decompose or be partially eaten by dogs. Gaza officials and the United Nations estimate about 10,000 Palestinians remain missing from Israel's more than 2-year assault, while the official death toll recently passed 70,000. Public broadcasters in Ireland, Slovenia, the Netherlands, and Spain.
Holy fucking shit, bro. We're gonna learn about more crimes. The crimes that are already embedded in your memory now, those wounds will be reopened in the coming years as we discover more details about these crimes. So just be prepared for that.
Said Thursday they'll boycott the 2026 Eurovision Song Contest after the European Broadcasting Union refused to hold a vote on whether to exclude Israel. This is José Pablo López, president of Spain's national broadcaster.
La misma posición que hace unos meses.
We maintain the same position we had months ago when we said Israel's participation in the Eurovision Festival was untenable for two main reasons. Firstly, because the genocide it has perpetuated in Gaza. As president of the corporation, I keep thinking that Eurovision is a contest, but human rights are not a contest.
Eurovision is among the most popular TV and online events in the world. Last year, viewers from 156 countries cast votes for their favorite contestants. In New Jersey, protesters picketed this morning outside a Jersey City warehouse that's used to transport military cargo to Israel. A recent report by the Palestinian Youth Movement and Progressive International found the warehouse handles over 1,000 tons of Israel-bound military cargo every week, including thousands of Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs that have been used to level Gaza. The U.S. Supreme Court has cleared the way for Texas to use
These people are heroes.
a new.
These people? Look how fucking cold they are, man. Heroes.
Gaza. The U.S. Supreme Court has cleared the way for Texas to use a new congressional map designed to help Republicans pick up as many as 5 House seats next year. A lower court had previously ruled the redistricting plan was unconstitutional because it would likely dilute the political power of Black and Latino voters. Liberal Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan wrote in her dissent, quote, "This court's stay ensures that many Texas citizens, for no good reason, will be placed in electoral districts because of their race. And that result, as this court has pronounced year in and year out, is a violation of the Constitution." We'll have more on that story after headlines. The FBI has arrested a 30-year-old man from Virginia for allegedly planting pipe bombs near the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters in January 2021 and the night before the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. The suspect, Brian Cole, is expected to appear in court today. Meanwhile, the Justice Department has asked a judge to re-jail a participant in the January 6th insurrection who'd been pardoned by President Trump. The Justice Department made the request after the man, Taylor Taranto, showed up near the home of Democratic Congressmember Jamie Raskin, who served on the January 6th House Select Committee. Security's been increased for Congressmember Raskin. In October, Taranto was sentenced to time served for making a threat near the home of former President Barack Obama. A federal grand jury in Virginia has declined a second attempt by the Justice Department to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James on charges she lied in her mortgage application. In a statement, Letitia James wrote, "As I have said from the start, the charges against me are baseless. It's time for this unchecked weaponization of our justice system to stop," she said. It's the latest defeat for President Trump's campaign of retribution against his political enemies. The Trump administration is reportedly considering a third attempt to obtain an indictment against James. In New Orleans, about 30 activists were ejected from a city council meeting Thursday after calling for ICE-free zones and asking local leaders to do more to protect immigrants. During a public comment period, members of...
Do we have to wonder why they're going after Letitia James? Because she's a black woman? I mean, easy target. Opportunistic timing. That's all it is.
The public went to the microphone one by one and were cut off when it became clear they wanted to speak on immigration, which wasn't on the formal agenda.
And I'm asking City Council for ICE-free zones, make all city-owned property ICE-free zones, and prohibit ICE and DHS from using city property to stage their operations. No collaboration with ICE. City Council must pass ordinances that codify non-collaboration between the City of New Orleans and ICE, including all of its offices.
As I stated previously, that is not germane. Thank you for your comments.
The protests came as the Border Patrol announced a surge of more than 200 federal immigration agents into New Orleans, which the agency is calling Operation Catahoula Crunch. They aim to make five...
Don't just take your paper and walk away. Don't just take your paper and walk away. Keep talking until they yank you out of the room, and then have them have to do that with every single person. That is resistance. You playing by the rules and them just telling you it's not on the agenda, that's them winning. Yeah, you may have kept them from talking about other things, but you've just slowed down their processes. You've only slowed them down. You have not struck fear into them at all. You have not traumatized them by having to witness armed guards pull out people trying to talk to them. Because what they do to you is nothing compared to what they do to your black and brown neighbors. Let them see it. Let them see what it looks like when someone who looks like them is brutalized. Maybe that'll get it through their heads. One after the other. For the entire session. That's resistance.
The Border Patrol announced a surge of more than 200 federal immigration agents.
Like, look at her face after she gets told to walk away. She looks over at her friends and smiles like she fucking did something.
Just came as the Border Patrol.
You did nothing. You played by their rules and went and sat down when they told you to sit. Good job.
Patrol announced a surge of more than 200 federal immigration agents into New Orleans, which the agency is
toothless,
calling Operation Catahoula Crunch. They aim to make 5,000 arrests over 2 months. We'll go to New Orleans later in the broadcast. Honduran presidential candidate Salvador Nasrallah has alleged fraud after his conservative rival, Nasri Asfoura, regained the lead as election officials continue to tally up votes from Sunday's election. Nasrallah also accused President Trump of interfering in the race by publicly backing Asfoura. Some election officials have also publicly criticized the election process. On Thursday, Marlon Ochoa, who serves on Honduras's National Electoral Council, decried what she called an electoral coup. She said, quote, "I believe there's unanimity among the Honduran people that we're perhaps in the least transparent election in our democratic history," unquote. President Trump welcomed the leaders of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda to Washington, D.C. Thursday for the signing of an agreement aimed at ending decades of conflict in the eastern DRC. Trump also announced the U.S. had agreed to bilateral deals that will open the African nation's reserves of rare earth elements and other minerals to U.S. companies. The signing ceremony was held in the newly renamed Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. During the event, Trump struggled to keep his eyes open. This follows other recent public appearances where Trump appeared to fall asleep a number of times. And once again, Trump was spotted wearing bandages on his right hand, which appeared bruised and swollen, covered with makeup. That fueled further speculation about the president's health. On Monday, the White House said the results from Trump's recent MRI exam were perfectly normal after Trump was unable to tell reporters aboard Air Force One what part of his body was scanned.
What part of your body was the MRI looking at?
I have no idea. It was just an MRI. What part of the body? It wasn't the brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing. Goodbye, everybody. You too.
In business news, Netflix has announced it'll buy Warner Brothers in a deal worth at least $72 billion. The deal could reshape the entertainment and media industry as it will give Netflix control of Warner's movie and TV studios as well as the HBO Max streaming service. In labor news, a dozen striking Starbucks workers were arrested in New York City Thursday as they blocked the doors to the
Maybe Netflix can stop running ads then.
the Empire State Building, where Starbucks has a corporate office. Starbucks workers at over 100 stores are on strike. In New Jersey, Democratic Socialist Joel Brooks and Jake Efros have made history after winning election to the Jersey City Council. They're the first socialists elected to public office in New Jersey in over a century. This follows the historic election of Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani as New York City's next mayor. A University of California student's been ordered to serve 90 days in jail for breaking into a Sonoma County poultry slaughterhouse and freeing 4 chickens. 23-year-old Zoe Rosenberg of Berkeley received the sentence on Wednesday after a jury convicted her in October of felony conspiracy and 3 misdemeanor counts. She was ordered to pay more than $100,000 to Petaluma Poultry, which is owned by the agribusiness giant Purdue Farms. Rosenberg supporters with the group Direct Action Everywhere say the chickens she rescued were worth $24. They're reportedly alive and well at a sanctuary for rescued farm animals. Rosenberg told supporters her action was prompted by investigations that found routine violations of California's animal cruelty laws at Petaluma poultry slaughterhouses.
Among the living, that the air quality was so poor that chickens were struggling to breathe. I myself was struggling to breathe, even with a KN95 mask, as I investigated this facility. And we have been calling on the California Attorney General to take action because the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office has made it abundantly clear that they do not care about these animals whatsoever. That they care far more about the profits of Purdue, a company that makes over $10 billion a year on the backs of these animals.
And the Trump administration has ended a policy granting visitors free access to national parks on the federal holidays Juneteenth and Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Instead, the 116 parks that charge entrance fees will now waive admission charges on June 14th, President Trump's birthday. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe.
Fucking bleak, dude.
I'm an American Just like you said, you're defending your country, Israel. I'm an American. Your country is on my country's welfare. We have financed and given you the weapons and the diplomatic cover and the literal protection and vetoed the resolutions at the UN. We have protected and propped up Israel. And you have a lot of nerve to turn around and then say that we scrutinize what you do too much. I am forced against my will to pay for the destruction of Gaza, to pay for the military occupation of Palestine. And yeah, when I see videos of the military occupiers murdering a couple of surrendering people, yeah, I'm going to scrutinize that. I'm going to have an opinion on that. And it's just absolutely outrageous that you guys sit here when the whole world is watching. Sir, let me be honest with you. When the whole world sees you describe the IDF as fighting terrorism, we're all going, I don't know how dumb you think we are. The IDF, you were a spokesman for the biggest terrorist organization in the region. Objectively, the worst.
All right, guys. So Dave Smith recently went on Piers Morgan to debate this IDF spokesman, Jonathan Conricus. Now, the content of what they're talking about at the top here centers on this video that recently came out of the occupied West Bank in Jenin, where you can very clearly see two Palestinian men with their hands up surrendering to the IDF, and they were subsequently executed on the spot. Now, also important context to this story is that the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, then went on to not only praise these soldiers for this cold-blooded murder, but also to promote the officer whose unit was responsible for it. So important context there, as Jonathan is going to start out here by defending the integrity of the IDF as well as the Israeli government's capabilities in holding their own accountable. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and then Dave is going to absolutely rip him apart.
It is actually quite tremendous, you know, the level of scrutiny of the IDF and of Israel, of Prime Minister, which I'm not here to defend, but I am speaking on behalf of my country in a sense. I think that, you know, the level of interest, scrutiny, and alleged focus and care about what happens, it is mind-boggling to see how much people allegedly care when it comes to dealing with issues that are related to Israel. And I think that one, you know, there's merit to what you've been saying, and of course, seeing a video like this, it looks horrible, and that is what I said, and I believe in it. And I also believe that just like in the past, the name of that soldier was Elor Azaria. You can check it up, what happened to him, how the IDF dealt with the issue, internal pressures, political pressures that, by the way, weren't very unsimilar to the current situation that the IDF is dealing with a complex political environment where everything is sensitive, where it is Israel fighting against terrorist organizations, and where we have politics that are involved in fighting.
So
but at
complicated.
the end of a long process and public debate, that soldier was held accountable for his deeds. And I believe that if these police...
Their talking points are so weak that even someone like Dave Smith can slap them around like they're nothing.
Policemen are indeed at fault, which the video looks like they were, but we shouldn't be hasty in delivering a sentence here. Then they will too face justice and they will face consequences.
Okay, so let's pause on that for a second, because I wasn't familiar with the name that he just threw out of this supposed example of an IDF soldier committing a crime and then being held accountable. So I went and I looked it up, and this is the guy that he's talking about, Elor Azaria. So let's go ahead and read just the basic Wikipedia of what happened to this guy. So on March 24th, 2016, Elor Azaria, an Israeli Defense Forces soldier, fatally shot Abdel Fattah al-Sharif, a Palestinian, in the head as the latter lay wounded on the ground in Tel Rumeida neighborhood of Hebron. They say al-Sharif had stabbed an Israeli soldier, and Azaria was then arrested, and the Israeli military police opened an investigation against him for the charge of murder, but later reduced the charge to manslaughter. Azaria was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 18 months imprisonment, 12 months probation, plus a demotion in rank. He was then released from prison after serving 9 months. So keep this in mind. This is the golden example that Jonathan just pulled out of his ass here in terms of the Israeli military being able to hold their soldiers accountable when they commit war crimes, is that one soldier 10 years ago got 9 months in prison, okay, because he shot a Palestinian man while he was lying on the ground in the head. That's his golden example of, look, we can hold our own accountable. 9 months in prison for a straight up execution of a Palestinian man. Now, obviously that doesn't count all of the other war crimes that Israeli soldiers haven't been held accountable for, whether it's, Hind Rajab or the countless other children that have been executed by the IDF, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, the countless examples of, Western doctors who have gone to Gaza and come back with stories of children being sniped in the head and the chest, whether it's the war crimes of attacking civilian infrastructure of schools, mosques, churches, hospitals, refugee camps, the targeting of journalists, the targeting of medical workers, the targeting of aid workers, the torture of doctors, the example of sexual torture of a Palestinian detainee in one of these Israeli torture dungeons that was basically protested by Israeli society on the side of the soldiers who sexually tortured that man, to the point where Israel essentially fired their top military lawyer and then subsequently arrested her for daring to release the video of that incident. Like, with all of that combined, IDF soldiers posting their war crimes on social media with no accountability, he throws out this one example from 10 years ago and expects that that's somehow convincing that we can hold our own accountable. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing stuff.
I think that is what
Yes, just an assertion.
when you fight, but
I know what you're going to say.
When you fight,
let me just say this. Here's the problem.
Yeah, but I mean, let me say it first. When you look at the amount of engagement, the amount of attacks, the amount of activity that Israel is forced to do every day and every night in order to defend itself.
Forced to do? Are they forced to engage in an illegal and offensive war against Iran? Is that something they were forced to do?
A very small percentage of activity doesn't go exactly as it is supposed to.
Yeah, but hang on, but I've just got your word for it. Jonathan, Jonathan, hang on. We just have your word for that. Because the Israeli government continues to ban all international journalists, even though there's been a ceasefire for nearly 2 months.
That isn't true either, Piers, and you know it. There's been more than 60 journalists inside Gaza since the ceasefire.
There are people from Israeli government-friendly media taken in, embedded, and
international journalists.
Really? Well, why is
international journalists?
Well, Clarissa Ward,
60 crews have gone in, including CNN and
okay. Well, Clarissa Ward. I'm glad you mentioned CNN because Clarissa Ward is one of the top people at CNN, one of their top international journalists, and she said this is your scheduled reminder. She posted today that international journalists are still not allowed to report freely and independently inside Gaza. We're more than 7 weeks into this ceasefire. The previous excuse given by Israeli authorities for the banning of journalists was it was a security consideration, which was seen by many as a smokescreen, as articulated by the Committee to Protect Journalists. For 2 years, Israel sought to control the narrative on Gaza with a range of measures that are unprecedented compared to any war in modern memory, said CPJ CEO Jody Ginsburg. This includes targeted killings of Palestinian journalists, attacks on media facilities, the banning of news outlets, and the prohibition on independent media access. With a ceasefire now in place, Israel cannot be allowed to normalize this unlawful behavior. And yet here we are, she says, on Monday, December the 1st, an international journalist still cannot report freely and independently inside Gaza. And the problem is, Jonathan, and I know you agree with what I've said about this before. The problem is, it leaves us, we have to then take your word for it about how the IDF has operated, because we can't get independent word for it. But it's only when these videos come out that it looks like actually they're not the most moral army in the world at all.
Piers, that Clarissa Ward that you're quoting and singing her praise is the same Clarissa Ward that I remember shooting a selfie video with big crocodile tears over a Palestinian so-called journalist.
She got duped.
Who, in fact, I forgot his name. Yeah. Well, no, she didn't get duped, and I don't think she did, and I don't think that she ever owned up to her mistake.
No, she made a mistake.
Did she own up to her mistake?
Yes,
did she own up to it and say,
Okay, we can go ahead and skip forward to Dave here, but notice the tactic that was deployed there by Jonathan, right? He initially starts out by citing that, journalists like Clarissa Ward, people from CNN, they've been allowed into Gaza, to the second that Piers then turns around and gives Clarissa Ward of CNN's critique of Israel, he then turns to smear Clarissa Ward and say, no, she's actually a terrorist sympathizer. Never mind, she's not a real journalist. I mean, just phenomenal stuff there. Let's go ahead and listen to Dave here.
Think I'm honest every time I'm on this show, but in the spirit of this moment of honesty, let me just be honest with you, okay? This tactic that you just used, that we all just witnessed, where first you're saying, we have let the media in. I don't know what you're talking about. 60 different crews have been let in. And then Piers shows you a CNN foreign correspondent saying, let me just finish my point here. Then he shows you a CNN foreign correspondent saying, hey, we're not allowed in. And then you immediately turn to a character attack on her. You immediately turn to, she's a bad person. You see, she's sympathetic to Hamas or hates the Jews or something like that. People are onto that and they're over it. Let me give you some more honest information organization here. For you, I'm an American. Just like you said, you're defending your country, Israel. I'm an American. Your country is on my country's welfare. We have financed and given you the weapons and the diplomatic cover and the literal protection and vetoed the resolutions at the UN. We have protected and propped up Israel. And you have a lot of nerve to turn around and then say that we scrutinize what you do too much. I am forced against my will to pay for the destruction of Gaza, to pay for the military occupation of Palestine. And yeah, when I see videos of the military occupiers murdering a couple of surrendering people, yeah, I'm going to scrutinize that. I'm going to have an opinion on that. And it's just absolutely outrageous that you guys sit here when the whole world is watching. Sir, let me be honest with you. When the whole world sees you describe the IDF as fighting terrorism, we're all going, I don't know how dumb you think we are. The IDF, you were a spokesman for the biggest terrorist organization in the region, objectively the worst. And it's a region full of terrorist organizations.
You're ridiculous.
And the IDF is the worst
the
one.
moment, I mean, you had my ear and attention and a bit of my respect until you said that nonsense.
I don't care.
The last part of what
I don't
you
care
said.
about your
You're
respect.
entitled to. Yeah, that's fine.
You're a spokesman
that's
for a
fine.
terrorist
you are entitled to your
organization,
opinion.
sir. I don't care about your respect.
You're entitled to your opinion sitting in your comfortable office in New York or wherever. You're entitled to have your feelings and opinions. The fact that you have them doesn't make it right. And the fact that you call the military of a nation state a terrorist organization, I think shows how ungrounded you are. And frankly, it's ridiculous.
You just said,
it's so pathetic.
About Clarissa,
you might as well have just been quiet for 30 seconds.
I said,
You're comfortable in New York City.
Specifically what I said
state government
about,
is a terrorist organization.
I said what I said about Clarissa because I think it is very relevant when people who are who have the role and the power as the main conduits of information that shape hearts and minds and that really tell the story of what's going on, allegedly what's going on in Gaza, when they are shown and exposed to have a very clear anti-Israeli bias, yes, that is part of the story. That needs to be.
Clarissa Ward and CNN have an anti-Israel bias. That's what I'm expected to believe.
But she got a story
and people
wrong.
should know about that because I think. No, it isn't only that. And again, had it only been getting a story wrong and owning up to the mistake and saying, well, I sure got this story wrong and maybe I should look at the other stories I got wrong, then I wouldn't have mentioned it. But I mention it because I think it is part of the issue. The level of scrutiny that Israel is under by so-called journalists who are basically opinion people that have big accounts on Instagram and corporate funding in terms of networks is unprecedented.
Well, Clarissa Ward is absolutely. I will defend. Listen, Jonathan, I will defend Clarissa Ward. She is not, as you're categorising her. They got duped, and CNN conceded they got duped. Right? It was an elaborate sting to this guy to pretend to be somebody he wasn't, and they got duped. It happens in news. And CNN immediately held their hands up and said, when they investigated, we got duped. But when it comes to investigations, I'm glad you raised that, because there have been myriad investigations launched by the IDF, launched by the Israeli government into allegations against the IDF. And you know the almost universal common denominator? We never get to hear what happens to them. We never get told the findings of all these investigations. I read out dozens of them a few months ago. Unresolved. It's just, we're investigating, and then they just hope everybody moves on. And that,
did you read, Pierce, did you see on Friday, did you see the UN Committee on Torture on Friday just released a new report saying there's widespread torture of Palestinians. Hundreds of them have died from torture in the last couple years. There's widespread, like, what are we even talking about here? Israel's under too much scrutiny?
Yeah, the reason Israel's
torturing people to death.
Well, the reason, Jonathan, that Israel is under so much scrutiny is precisely because it goes out of its way to avoid scrutiny. Right? It literally bans,
I don't think that's the reason.
If you're honest,
I don't think that's
I would have to disagree with that.
The journalists
yeah, we know.
There's a ceasefire.
That is the reason.
There's a ceasefire.
I agree.
But Jonathan, the bullshit excuse is for the journalists' own safety, which was always bullshit, because they've all reported from all sorts of war zones.
And here I agree with you.
Clarissa, who's a very, very courageous journalist.
Let them in.
Let them go in and do their jobs.
I agree.
Let me agree.
I agree.
But that's why you get scrutinized.
A long time ago.
I mean, for Israel or an IDF spokesperson to have the audacity to complain about facing scrutiny from the United States or the rest of the world, which, by the way, the U.S. media, like when we're talking about the mainstream media, you know, people like Dave and actual real independent critics aside, like, almost uniformly, the mainstream media in the United States, uniformly, the establishment of both the Republican and the Democratic parties are extremely biased in the pro-Israel direction. They're essentially nonstop regurgitating IDF talking points as if they are the gospel of the Lord, right? This is how the United States has operated for years and years and years. And now you have a tad more scrutiny, maybe because you've committed about 50,000 war crimes in front of the entire world. Again, many of them proudly posted by your own soldiers on social media, and you know, live streaming this genocide for 2+ years straight. It's not surprising that you would face a little bit of scrutiny, especially as Dave points out there, when we are the main country that is allowing you to do these kinds of things. Israel would not be able to antagonize every single one of its neighbors, to start wars with every single one of its neighbors. It wouldn't be able to commit a genocide in Gaza. It wouldn't be able to be engaging in the kind of psycho rogue state behavior that it is right now if it wasn't for the United States giving them diplomatic cover on the international stage and attacking the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court for trying to hold Israel accountable for their various crimes, or whether it's the financial aid, or whether it's the weapons that we give them to carry out this genocide in Gaza. This would not be able to happen if it wasn't for the United States giving them the protection to do so. So to then turn around after we've given you how many tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars throughout the years, and complain that, oh, you guys are asking us questions about our live on tape caught war crimes? How dare you? I mean, it's just so beyond insulting to the American people.
No, that isn't why we get scrutinized, Piers. That isn't why international network, Piers, that isn't why international networks have their biggest out of London or out of US offices in Jerusalem, out of all places in the world. That isn't why the amount of international journalists per people here is the highest ratio in the world. That isn't why news editions around the world and internet and TV and shows like yours have such a tremendous focus on Israel. It isn't because...
Yeah, the reason why our mainstream media outlets have massive hubs inside of Israel is because the United States and Israel have been getting ourselves into numerous different wars for decades in the Middle East. And by the way, many of these outlets like CNN, for example, literally run some of their coverage through IDF censors in Israel. Okay, this is the kind of like anti-Israel bias that we're talking about here. If anything, it is a massive pro-Israel bias, and they're not going to put their fucking media hub in the Middle East in Iran. Okay, that's not how this works. So completely moot point there from Jonathan on that.
Israel tries to evade scrutiny. It has to be different things. It goes back deeper. It is rooted in history. It is rooted in the land that we're in. It's probably related to that whole...
Oh my God, rooted in the land that you stole.
At the end of the day,
well, that's it. Okay, so yes, all right, hang on. Can I just respond? Dave, I will let you come in, but I'm going to...
So everything is just anti-Semitism, right? It's not that we're trying to hold Israel accountable, again, as we are propping them up and we are responsible for much of what they're doing right now. It's not that we're trying to hold them accountable for various war crimes that they're committing, for the genocide that they're committing, for the ethnic cleansing that they're committing in the West Bank, or the illegal occupation of both Gaza and the West Bank and southern Lebanon and in Syria, by the way. It's not that we're trying to hold them accountable to international law. It's that we're all just anti-Semites. That's the line. That's all that they have at this point. It's just to scream anti-Semite. If you dare to criticize me, you must hate the Jewish people. It's so beyond lazy and, again, insulting at this point that nobody's buying this. This is why so many Americans, especially young Americans, especially, you know, the Democratic coalition, but even more so the Republican and the right-leaning coalition, as exemplified by somebody like Dave Smith in this kind of a conversation, this is why people have abandoned Israel. We're not falling for the shit anymore. We're not falling for the bullshit Hasbara talking points that come out of your ass, okay? We're not lazy. We're not going to fall for the same kinds of talking points that you've been able to get away with for decades and decades at this point. It's just not going to work. But we can continue here as they get into more of the conversation on anti-Semitism.
To give it a peg to come in, because actually you perfectly timed that, Jonathan, where you try and conflate scrutiny of the Israeli government and criticism of the Israeli government with people hating Israelis or hating Jews, because the Anti-Semite of the Year nominees have just been revealed. Christmas, and even anti-Semitic. What's quite interesting about this list is organized...
I mean, look at this list. First off, StopAntisemitism.org is a complete joke of an organization. Nobody should take it seriously, just like nobody should take the ADL seriously. But the Stop Anti-Semitism is even more of a joke somehow than the ADL. But look at this list. Top 10 finalists for Anti-Semite of the Year. First thing that actually, besides any of the people that are on this list that jumped out, is that there's no, like, Nick Fuentes on this list, which is kind of amazing, right? Like, he's an actual, you know, self-proclaimed neo-Nazi as far as I'm aware, and he's not even on this list. You have people like Tucker Carlson. Miss Rachel is number 2. Miss Rachel, the person who makes, like, children's sing-along videos and who had the audacity to say Palestinian children deserve to live. Please, Israel, can you stop killing them at an industrial scale? That's what she said, right? She is number 2 for anti-Semite of the year, according to Stop Anti-Semitism. Then you have this guy, Guy Christensen, who's like an online pro-Palestine, TikToker, essentially. You have a couple people who I'm less familiar with, but then you have people like Cynthia Nixon, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian. Like, none of these people are anti-Semites. Again, I'm not going to comment on some of the people who I'm not aware of, like Stu Peters and Bryce Mitchell, but from the people I know on this list, they are not anti-Semites. They are critics of Israel. And you are eviscerating any sort of meaning or substance to the term anti-Semitism when you call somebody like Miss Rachel an anti-Semite, right? You are dissolving the meaning of that word, and you're conflating it with, again, just criticism of Israel, which is not anti-Semitism any more than criticizing the government of Saudi Arabia is Islamophobic.
By the Stop Anti-Semitism watchdog is just the ones that I know who've come on this show. Tucker Carlson, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian. Just those 3 alone. I've never heard them express their hatred for Jewish people. Why would they be branded anti-Semitic, even if they've been aggressively critical of the Israeli government? Dave, I'll let you respond to that, because it really flies to the ongoing running sore I have about this, because I get branded anti-Semitic purely because I criticise Netanyahu's decision-making, which I think is completely outrageous. But it's done.
Try all you want. You are a latecomer to being pro-Palestine, Piers.
I think the list there, I think those are the 3 people I know on it too, are Cenk, Anna, and Tucker. And it's just, no, they're not anti-Semites at all. They've never once said anything about the Jews. No. They've all bent over backwards to say that's not what I'm about. Miss Rachel, as far as I understand, just makes little kids like programming and feels bad for the Palestinians. It's insane that they go after her. But to Jonathan's point, even when he tied this together, look, Piers, like, just look at these facts objectively, okay? Like, I'm trying to remove my opinion from it as much as possible. Over the last 2 years, Israel has essentially destroyed all of Gaza. They've expanded settlements on the West Bank in their occupied territory under their military occupation there, and a bunch of people have been killed over there. Despite what Dave Rubin doesn't know about anything, Piers, you were absolutely correct. There have been settlement expansions. Israel has also bombed Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. I think I'm missing one. I think there was a 7th over the last 2 years. Might that be why there is some scrutiny on them, Pierce? Maybe it's not just everyone's hated by anti-Semitism.
No.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Might there be a reason why Israel bombed it, Dave? Did anybody attack Israel?
One second. Jonathan, I was trying to remove my own opinion and just state the objective facts. We could have that whole argument. The point is, there is another reason than just you're talking here with Piers Morgan, isn't a Jew hater, and me, who is Jewish, and you're invoking anti-Semitism whenever Israel gets criticism. Maybe it's just that you guys are a rogue regime that's killing tens of thousands of people and violating international law, and also attempting to drag my country into more and more conflicts, exerting an undue amount of influence on my government. Maybe that's what's going on, and maybe you should admit this. It's like you're like the person who's like a serial gambler and then says the reason I'm losing everything is because everyone's against me. Look at your own behavior, man.
All right, we could wrap it up there. I mean, shout out to Dave, absolutely nailing it on every single point there. To his point, though, about, like, Israel having undue influence in the United States. Obviously, we talk a lot on this channel about the Israel lobby and AIPAC and et cetera, and the massive amounts of money, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that our politicians get in exchange for running on a pro-Israel platform. But beyond that, he also mentioned Israel dragging the United States into, foreign wars. The most recent example of this was obviously in the Iran situation. Now, Israel wanted us to go full out and do a full-blown regime change war in Iran. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but we did have like a 12-day war where the U.S. went in and we tried to bomb the shit out of their nuclear facilities. And this reminded me of back when Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States and was arguing for the U.S. invading Iraq. And you know what he said at the time? I believe it was in 2002. He came to Congress and he said, if the United States goes into Iraq and they topple Saddam Hussein, then it will lead to positive, peaceful reverberations throughout the entirety of the Middle East, right? He said the invasion of Iraq will be easier and even more successful than the invasion of Afghanistan, which obviously both of those situations played out so well, not only for the people of the region, but also for the United States of America, with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people killed and displaced and horrifically maimed and terrorized, but also trillions of dollars wasted. Huge blow to the United States government, to the United States, the American people broadly. And so this is like the kind of country that we're talking about here, right? There's a reason why there's a heightened level of scrutiny when it comes to Israel. It's that, yeah, there is a massive undue influence from the Israeli government on the United States government. We essentially treat them as the 51st state, and even that isn't really getting the full picture of it, because we treat Israel better than most American states, arguably. And what do we get out of it? Well, again, we get, attempts to drag us into wars in the region to fight on Israel's behalf. We get complicity in genocide and ethnic cleansing and apartheid. And we get, again, essentially the bribery of American politicians at a mass scale with organizations like AIPAC that don't even have to register as foreign lobbying organizations. So we get nothing out of this relationship in any real sense of the word. It is a detrimental and toxic relationship that we have with Israel. And so we should be hyper-critical of this relationship. We should be hyper-critical of everything that Israel does, because we're giving them billions of dollars. We are protecting them on the international stage. We are allowing them to use our weapons to conduct this rogue behavior in the region. So let's not be less critical of Israel. Let's not put on blinders and accept the word of dipshits like this guy, Jonathan Conricus. Let's be hypercritical and aggressive in our criticism of Israel, because they deserve every last fucking bit of it.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him.
Really good video.
Just a reminder, you're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm Ali Abu Nermeh. And on our last show, November 20th, we talked with international human rights lawyer and former UN official Craig Muhaibat about the outrageous Security Council resolution passed last month that gave the UN's blessing to Trump's so-called peace plan for Gaza. We've seen throughout this whole show, from the start with the news brief, that there is no peace in Gaza, there's no ceasefire. And you'll remember what Craig Muhaibat said. Quote, "This resolution is a real direct assault on the Palestinian people, on their rights, on their hopes of liberation. It is an atrocity with the UN insignia on it." And Muhaibat really said that it imposes neo-colonial control on Gaza. That's if they can implement it. Now, a key element of Trump's UN-endorsed plan is the creation of an international stabilization force authorized, quote, "to use all necessary measures to carry out its mandate, which includes disarming Palestinian resistance organizations." It also calls for the establishment of a so-called Board of Peace, headed by Trump himself, to govern and rebuild Gaza. Now, we've been reporting from the beginning that disarming the resistance against its will is an impossible task that no country is willing or able to do, especially after Israel, with full Western backing, spent more than 2 years perpetrating genocide and utterly failing to defeat the Palestinian resistance. But according to recent reports, not only are the US efforts to put together an international stabilization force stalled, they're actually moving in reverse. And I want to take a closer look at some of those reports now, starting from this big article that appeared in the Washington Post on November 29th, with the headline, "International Force at Heart of Trump's Gaza Plan Struggles to Find Takers." And I'm just going to kind of read through some key points and comment on them. That's how I'm going to do this. It says, "The proposed deployment of an international force in Gaza, seen as a crucial feature of President Donald Trump's plan to bring peace to the enclave, is struggling to get off the ground as countries considered likely to contribute soldiers have grown wary. Concerns are mounting in foreign capitals over whether soldiers could be put in a position where they may be required to use force against Palestinians." That's a point we've made all along, that no one wants to sign up to fight the Qassam brigades. And according to the Washington Post, Indonesia, which had announced it would send as many as 20,000 peacekeeping troops, is now looking at providing a much smaller contingent. Azerbaijan, which had also been expected to send troops, has also reassessed, according to officials speaking to the Washington Post, and not one Arab country is committed to sending soldiers. "A month ago, things were in a better place," said one regional official with knowledge of the discussions. The Washington
She's kind of a big
Post
deal, then.
reports. And then they say that even countries that are keen to win favor with the US administration, many uncertainties remain for them, including the thorny question of how the force would go about securing weapons from Hamas, which has sent mixed signals about its willingness to disarm. I don't think they've been mixed at all. They've been quite clear they won't be disarming in any context other than there being a real sovereign Palestinian state to which they can hand over their weapons. Quote, they want the international stabilizing force to come into Gaza and restore law and order and disarm any resistance, a senior official in Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said, as quoted in the Washington Post. So that's the problem. Nobody wants to do that, the official added. And then they detail that Indonesia, instead of this 20,000 that they talked about, is now talking about maybe sending 1,200 soldiers to do various tasks that definitely don't include fighting against the resistance. And according to the Washington Post, it says here, Middle East governments had rebuked Indonesia for going out ahead of them and committing peacekeepers, according to an official the Washington Post quotes. And now the Indonesians are saying they're going to focus on health and construction rather than anything to do with the force that is disarming the resistance. Notable here, too, according to the Washington Post, is that Gulf countries that had been expected to participate have cold feet, according to a regional official quoted by the Post. Anwar Gargash, a diplomatic advisor to the President of the United Arab Emirates, said earlier this month that his government does not see a clear framework for the force, according to the Washington Post. And that's really significant because the United Arab Emirates is one of the closest allies of Israel and the United States in the region. Quote, the ambiguity of this whole thing is not settling very well here in Abu Dhabi, said Abdel Khaled Abdullah, a prominent Emirati political scientist who described a 180-degree turn in the Emirates' willingness to send troops over the last year. And the same vagueness and uncertainty also applies to the so-called Board of Peace, which is supposed to be the civilian governance arm of this Trump peace plan. And the Washington Post says, the establishment of an international force is part of the second phase of Trump's plan, which also calls for a Board of Peace, headed by Trump, to oversee Gaza for 2 years. Then they quote another regional official, unnamed official, quote, we thought with the Security Council resolution, within 48 to 72 hours, the Board of Peace would be announced, but nothing, not even informally, has happened. So that gives a sense of the disarray there. And then finally, there is this little bit where, I don't know, maybe we should get Benjamin Netanyahu as a guest on the live stream because he seems to be expressing the same skepticism that we have. The Washington, that's a joke, by the way. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expressed skepticism over the feasibility of an international force. The Washington Post says, quote, we said, go ahead, try. Netanyahu said of discussions with Washington during an interview last week with the Israeli social media outlet Abu Ali Express. Quote, they think international forces from different countries might disarm Hamas, fine, you can try, end quote. Well, that's Netanyahu's view, which is apparently similar to our analysis that the Israeli army can't do it, certainly Indonesia and Azerbaijan can't either. But this is the really sinister part of what Netanyahu is saying, according to the Washington Post. Israel is working on the assumption that it will eventually have to demilitarize Hamas itself because no one else will be willing, said Ofer Guterman, a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies. So that's the conclusion, really, of the Washington Post story, and really provides us with some insight into why Israel is absolutely unwilling to declare an end to the war or to stop its genocide, because they want to go back to a full-throated genocide. Of course, the question, and this is where John's analysis is so helpful, is whether Israel is capable, and we still see no sign that they are. Now let's move to another article from the Washington Post, and this is a column yesterday from David Ignatius. He's a regular columnist, but he's a very reliable mouthpiece for deep state intelligence services and officials, and so you read him in order to understand what the government and intelligence services think. And he provides additional context around the disarray in Gaza in his column headline, The Middle East's Moment of Opportunity is Slipping Away. And he begins by saying that the past 2 years of war brought death and destruction to the Middle East, but they also created remarkable openings for change in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. So you can see the perspective of where he's coming from. However, he says, sadly, those opportunities might be squandered because of mishandling and delay by the United States, Israel, and the Arab states. Everything is done. A senior Israeli defense official told me.
It's disappointing when you find out some of your favorite artists are Zionists. You know what I mean?
This week, this is David Ignatius writing, because diplomats have failed to capitalize on the disarray of Iran and its allies. All the fronts in the Middle East are still open, he warned. And then Ignatius points out, he says, other than the release of all living Israeli hostages from Gaza, most of the goals of Trump's 20-point peace plans appear still.
Yeah, I know how you feel. My favorite band was Radiohead, dude. And their history with Zionism is fucked. Oh shit is right. It took me too long to realize, I think.
Israel achieved some stunning successes in its bloody campaigns against Hamas.
I did a whole video on it if you want to watch it.
Hezbollah in Iran. But Robert Satloff, director of the Washington Institute, now that's a think tank set up by the Israel lobby group AIPAC. I'm telling you that. David Ignatius doesn't disclose it at all. Robert Satloff cautioned in an interview this week that, quote, the Israelis
Nice. It already feels very Monty Python. Yeah. Saying the Irish get a little cabin fever. They get bored, yeah. That's why they travel.
Says if you will be my lover so true, this could
Very strange. I like it.
Have so far failed to translate battlefield victories into
Creepy
political
puppets are
achievements.
great.
These are sad and regrettable lost opportunities. Now, I point that out because that admission is important, that Israel's most fanatical supporters and representatives in Washington, as AIPAC and its think tanks are, don't see Israel as having won victories or succeeding. And that gives us a sense that all of the Israeli announcements of great victories and stunning successes, whether against Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran, are hot air. What they really think is that they have failed. What Satloff is suggesting there, this reflects the thinking of many officials and David Ignatius, as we'll see in a moment, is that it could have gone another way if they had been clever enough in, finding the right collaborators or training just the right number of Palestinian police. That they could have taken that opportunity.
Jim
What
Henson
they don't seem to understand
cringe.
is that Israel's methods of massacres and destruction and genocide and assassinations of leaders don't work. They don't address Israel's fundamental issue, which is its illegitimacy in the eyes of the people of the region, and their unwillingness to submit to living under its brutality and their unwillingness to give up their rights in favor of Zionism. And Ignatius goes deeper into sort of the hopes that, or rather he admits that Israel's war in Gaza, or its genocide in Gaza, illustrates, quote, the limits of Israeli military power to achieve political results. He concedes that Hamas still controls half of Gaza, where roughly 85% of the population live, and that the other elements, the Board of Peace and the Stabilization Force, are still, in his words, just a fantasy. Now, I'm going to end looking at his article with this paragraph. I'll read it and then I'll comment on it. How can Trump and his partners break this logjam? They can recognize the screamingly obvious fact that the only force that can effectively disarm Hamas will be Palestinians allied with a reformed version of the Palestinian Authority. Many Israeli military and security officials have long embraced this view. So what Ignatius is saying here is that what we need is a Palestinian civil war, that we need Palestinians allied with a reformed Palestinian Authority to disarm Hamas, and that this is the vision of many Israeli military and security officials, which he's trying to launder in the pages of the Washington Post as common sense. But of course, we've seen how when Israel tries that time and time again, it fails. And of course, the United States sponsored the original civil war between Hamas and Fatah back in 2006 after Hamas won those Palestinian legislative elections. And what's also interesting in Ignatius's stenography of official thinking is that there is no mention whatsoever of Palestinian rights. And in his column, there isn't even a cursory mention of a Palestinian state. That is where official thinking is, that the question of Palestine is merely one of finding the right caliber bullets to kill the right Palestinians and to find the right collaborators to rule the survivors on behalf of the colonial occupier. These people just are incapable of conceiving that the Palestinians are a people with rights, dignity, and determination to win their liberation. And that's why these schemes, no matter how much death and destruction they cause, will fail time and time again. And that brings me to the next article. You may have been wondering all this time, where are the sensible, reasonable Europeans? Well, here they are. They're working with Egypt to try to set up a force of Palestinian collaborators to go into Gaza. And we have from just the past couple of days, this really lengthy report from the Times of Israel with the headline, Egypt and EU stepping up preparations to dispatch Palestinian police force to Gaza. And as is often the case, that headline is somewhat misleading, because if you were only going to read the headline, you'd think they were just about ready to send these forces in. When you read the article, you find that they are also in just as much disarray as the so-called International Stabilization Force. And let's take a look at just some of the key passages of this article and what they reveal about the political intent of those behind the scheme. The article starts off saying Egypt and the European Union are preparing to expand training of Palestinian police for deployment in Gaza under US President Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan for the Strip. 2 diplomats and a foreign official briefed on the issue have told the Times of Israel. The force, like many components of the US framework, remains largely aspirational, said the officials, who include an Arab and a European diplomat. So David Ignatius called Trump's plan a fantasy, and here the New York Times is calling it, or rather the Times of Israel is calling it, largely aspirational. And they detail how really nothing about it has been
What did they look like? Henson. It's Jim Henson. Oh shit. Oh, there's Kermit. Like a desaturated Kermit. I like the worm. The worm character with sunglasses. The human hair is so fucked. Oh wait, what the fuck? These are like off-brand puppets, but...
finalized. But the goal is a rehashing of the same old plans that they've tried time and again, which is just what David Ignatius proposed, to pit Palestinians against each other, to try to recruit Palestinians to do what the Israeli army couldn't do, and here in the guise of a police force. And the Times of Israel says, before the war, Gaza was policed by an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 officers serving under the auspices of Hamas, which has controlled the Gaza Strip since 2007, but is supposed to cede power under the Trump plan. Now, of course, as John pointed out, Hamas didn't agree to any of the other points in the Trump plan, except the first phase, which had to do with the ceasefire and the exchange of prisoners and the entry of humanitarian aid provisions, all of which Israel is still violating. And when I say Hamas, I mean Hamas and all the other resistance factions together in a united front. The Times of Israel says, in place of Hamas, that is, the international community is seeking to install an armed Palestinian force tasked with day-to-day law enforcement. And then they talk about, I won't go into all the detail about, just the arrangements Egypt and the EU are doing and the training they're trying to do, with Jordan involved as well. And they say that one of the key things they want to do is bring in former officers of the Palestinian Authority security forces who are loyal to the Palestinian Authority, Ramallah and Mahmoud Abbas, who continued to receive Palestinian Authority salaries after 2007, even though they were just sitting at home. And that's where they're hoping to find thousands of people to join the police. They say, according to the Times of Israel, since 2007, some 7,000 police officers are believed to have remained in Gaza on the PA payroll. Michael Milstein, a senior researcher at Tel Aviv University's Dayan Center, said few officers likely remain fit for reintegration after nearly 2 decades away from the police work. So now they're suggesting, and this is where it gets somewhat comical, that those guys who have been sitting at home for 20 years, getting salaries, who are incapable of going out, and carrying guns and being in the street, can sit at desks and do bureaucratic work, and they'll find other people to go out into the streets, but it's not clear where. But what is clear in the article, they say here, the European diplomat said most of the 3,000 officers the EU hopes to train would come from Gaza and be trained in Egypt, though the exact site is not finalized. And here's really the crucial line that tells you what this force is about. The Times of Israel says, vetting would be handled by Israel and the US. So this, you can put Egypt's name on it, you can put the, do-gooder Europeans, they're going to be the ones paying for it, but vetting would be handled by Israel and the US. So this force would be hand-picked by the United States, Israel, to serve as traitors and collaborators against the Palestinian people in the service of schemes backed by Arab regimes to destroy the Palestinian people and their cause. That is when you distill all this babble down, that's always what you get to. And there are also, I'll just end my look at the Times of Israel article with this. On paper, they always say, well, this is about providing policing and security to ordinary Gazans. But they're very open about the political goals here. And the Times of Israel says both Egypt and the EU see the police as a key entry point for reaching Gazans on the ground and shaping the Strip's post-war recovery. In other words, they say, quote, the police force could also enable a gradual, non-violent transition of power by providing a viable non-Hamas security presence. A third foreign official said members of the force could form the next leadership of Gaza, including future intelligence heads. So this is about installing a collaborator leadership, not one elected by Palestinians. Finally, and this takes me into some of the news that came out today, towards the end of the Times of Israel article, they talk about whether these, we've covered them before, these ISIS-linked, Israeli-backed gangs of criminals and collaborators, Palestinian criminals and collaborators backed by Israel, that Israel has been using and supporting to terrorize people in Gaza, to steal aid and setting them up as kind of a proxy force to maintain chaos in Gaza, whether they would be integrated into the police force. And the Times of Israel says, local armed militias opposed to Hamas also operate, some having cooperated with Israel during the war, and some still protecting civilians in IDF-held areas. At least one report suggests such militias might be integrated into the police force. And this reminds me of, how to broaden the scope, we've seen the Europeans and the Americans integrating literal neo-Nazis, Sieg-heiling, swastika-tattooed Nazis into the official armed forces of Ukraine on the one hand, and we see how they're supporting a so-called government closely tied with ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, and they would like to do the same here, to place ISIS-linked gangs into the official police force that they hope to send into Gaza. And they talk about, the Times of Israel says, militia leader Hussam al-Astal said he received messages from American representatives indicating that his group and others could play a role in Gaza's future police force. Now, the Israeli analyst Milstein is actually the one to pour cold water on this. He says, according to the Times of Israel, that such groups are small and widely viewed as criminals, narcotics runners, or collaborators. He argued integrating them would have obvious negative effects. That, of course, has never deterred the European, American, and Arab allies of Israel. But I think the biggest blow to any such scheme came today with the news of the killing of Yasser Abu Shabab. He is, of course, the best-known Palestinian collaborator in Israel, the head of an Israeli-backed, ISIS-linked criminal gang that Israel has unleashed on parts of Gaza over the last 2 years. And you can see there his picture in a tweet from Rami Abdo, the Palestinian human rights defender from Gaza, saying Hebrew news channels report the killing of informant Yasser Abu Shabab, leader of militias collaborating with the Israeli occupation, along with his assistant informant Ghassan al-Dukhayni. Both had previously been linked to ISIS before openly working for Israel. Now, the circumstances of Abu Shabab's killing are murky. Israeli forces at first tried to portray it as sort of internecine violence or clan violence, while unconfirmed reports said that it was actually an operation carried out by the resistance. And this seems to be supported by a tweet from Shai Levi of Mako, which is an Israeli news outlet affiliated with Israel's Channel 12. And he says there, quote, Yasser Abu Shabab was eliminated because he aided Israel in the fighting, and especially in violations of Gaza's ceasefire agreement. Beyond that, nothing more can be written because censorship is being used in a draconian manner to conceal a strategic mishap that has already begun to follow up. Now, undoubtedly, more information will come out. The important point here is that Israel, the United States, the European Union, and perhaps some of the Arab tyrannies allied with them, were placing their hopes on anti-Palestinian collaborators like Abu Shabab to try to restore or to try to install in Gaza a regime to their liking and that would serve their and Israel's interests and not the Palestinian people. What the killing of Yasser Abu Shabab does is it really is a death blow to those fantasies, and it will certainly concentrate the minds of any of those few other Palestinians who would think about collaborating with Israel on such a schemes, even perhaps in the context of the so-called International Stabilization Force or the police, of the futility of doing so, that Israel is absolutely unwilling and unable to protect them.
Ali, thank you so much for breaking all of that down. And we've talked about this before, but this, like, the colonial arrogance that, Jared Kushner and the Trump administration and Israel and, the PA are all talking about how, we have a plan, that Hamas and Qassam brigades they'll be so excited about this plan that requires them to surrender and disarm, and they're going to be, they're just going to fall in line, but they're very sure of this. It's like, I don't know. It's this fantasy that they just keep trying to recycle over and over and over.
Yeah, and I didn't. Yeah. I wanted to go into it, but I didn't want to throw too much at everyone at once. But really, the Jared Kushner's plan is, and he seems to be key, as John said, him and Steve Witkoff are running the show. They have this fantasy of what they call alternative secure communities, which is, I don't know, maybe they asked GTP, can you come up with a more media-friendly term for concentration camps?
It's very like
they came up with alternative secure communities. And the idea here is, and it's one that's been tried so many times, and it's such a racist idea, that, if you will have these concentration camps on the Israeli-controlled side of the Yellow Line, where people will be allowed to have food, medicine, we'll be building, high-rise towers or whatever it is, and people will be drawn there. People on the Hamas-controlled side of Gaza will say, "Oh, look how good life is in the Jared Kushner towns. So we're going to go and live under Israeli rule in the Jared Kushner towns." But the key to this was these were going to be policed by collaborator gangs. So this is also a severe blow to the whole Jared Kushner fantasy as well.
It's like what the Americans tried to do in South Vietnam with the strategic hamlets, and that it was against the National Liberation Forces, against the first effect of the American military occupation. That too was a failure. You know, they're trying to build these zones, and it was just a way to
because they're incapable of conceiving. You know, colonizers, and this is true throughout history and across the world, in the past 500 years of Western barbarism in Africa and Latin America, North America, as they are now, and across Asia, is they can't conceive of their victims as communities who have their own sense of identity, their own goals, their own dignity, their own determination to live free from such tyranny. They think of them as just, you know, bodies that eat, and if you wave, I don't know, some peanut butter or granola bars across the bar from the other side of the barbed wire fence, that they're all going to come running over and say, yes, we'll do what you want. Yeah. And they tried that with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They've tried it time and time again. And nowhere in this discourse, you can read through all these articles, do they talk about Palestinian rights? Right. Not even the EU, who pretends, you know, the EU, one of the most violent racist organizations on the planet, still markets itself as, you know, human rights and apple pie and everything. They don't even use that rhetoric anymore with the Palestinians. They only talk in these military and security firms and who can we bribe and who can we entice to come to our side and who can we train to go and fight for Israel against the other Palestinians. Yeah. These are evil plans, really evil plans. And none of them will succeed, but they cause tremendous suffering in the meantime.
No, there's a long history of this, right? Like the Fatah forces, the coup forces that tried to overthrow the Hamas election, they were numbered in the tens of thousands. They were well equipped. They were rooted on the land. They had been in control for a decade and a half, or more even, since Oslo. And they were dismantled by Qassam in literally hours. I covered that battle. It spread over several months, but the actual combat was short and swift, and they overthrew tens of thousands of security officials, security forces, trained security forces backed by the U.S., and they couldn't defeat them. So now they think that...
Because, John, sorry to interrupt, because people will fight for their rights, for their dignity, for their families, for their communities. They won't fight for a $300 a month salary from the European Union. They will take the salary. You know, sure, they'll take it as long as they can just march around in a square. But when you tell them, go kill those other Palestinians, €300 salary isn't going to do it.
The whole world has watched for 2 years as those other Palestinians have been bombed 100,000 times, $25 billion in U.S. weapons given to Israel to destroy Qassam. And there today, they can't find a few dozen of them under their control for more than a year and a half in Rafah. So it's just, there's a lack of seriousness to this whole discourse and a deep lack of knowledge of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah. Say a little more, John. I mean, when you were in Gaza 20 years ago, covering the fight between Fatah and Hamas, what parallels can you, like, how does that inform what the U.S. and the EU and Israel want for Gaza in terms of this, like, so, you know, training new police forces? You also covered the Dayton forces after that. Keith Dayton, the U.S. Marine who was in charge of training Palestinian Authority security officials in Jordan. Like, what kind of patterns did you see, and what kind of chance does this, you know, Dayton forces of today have in a place like Gaza?
I don't have the numbers off the tip of my head right now, but the security forces out of Oslo, the PA security forces, had the largest security force to population ratio of anywhere in the world. And Qassam, who in 2006 was coming out of the Intifada, which attacked them hard, they lost a lot of their cadre and leadership, and still in that moment, they destroyed the Fatah forces, the coup forces. They destroyed them. We're talking now a generation later where there's been a programatized development of a national army under the Qassam Brigade's leadership and the Joint Operations Room, which brings in the other factions, including the factions that one would believe would fight with Fatah, to fight under a unified command. And it's such a success of this war that the Joint Operations Room and the unity of position, the unity of the resistance, the unity of their messaging from all different factions across the board, that's the message that's coming out of this war, is that the unification of the Palestinian project was what helped make it be successful in Gaza. So people in Gaza see that, and they're not going to be clamoring. Look, Abu Shabab had food, medicine, warehouses, ATVs, trucks from Israel. People didn't go flooding across there was no yellow line at that time. People could have just walked and joined his forces. They didn't do that. Not even his family did it. His family disowned him. There is no support whatsoever for this kind of action in Gaza right now, even by people who dislike Hamas, because it is seen as coming on the heels of a 2-year genocide that was looking to annihilate the entire Palestinian civilization. For people to collaborate at this point in the war is something that's so far beyond anything that's ever happened before in Palestine. And that kind of
we saw this yesterday.
Anger at Israel, people aren't angry at Hamas. They're angry at Israel. They know who tries to kill them. They know who successful
collaborators get executed.
turn to Minnesota, where more than 100 federal immigration agents are conducting operations this week as President Trump escalates his attacks on the Somali community in the state. The Trump administration halted green card and citizenship applications from Somalis and people from 18 other countries after last week's fatal shooting of a National Guardsman near the White House. One of those guardsmen died, another is fighting for his life. That was when an Afghan man who once worked for the CIA shot 2 members of the Guard. During a cabinet meeting Tuesday, Trump attacked the Somali community, making comments that were later widely condemned.
I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you. Okay? Somebody say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I can say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go.
Does anybody look to Trump for strength or security at all? Like, this is like your dad saying, hey buddy, I don't know if I don't know if I got it this month, you know? It's like that Dave Chappelle joke.
Go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage.
President Trump's comments at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday. Congressmember Ilhan Omar, a Somali-American first refugee congressmember, called President Trump's comments and his obsession with her, as she described it, creepy, said he needs help. Trump made similar remarks on Wednesday. On Thursday, Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called Trump's racist tirades dangerous. He also noted the vast majority of Somalis who live in Minnesota are American citizens and legal permanent residents.
It appears very little's being done. They bring these folks in from Texas or somewhere like that. I'm sure they're too cold to get out of their cars to harass people, but they're doing it in New Orleans. It's all about show. It's not about. They demonized an entire group, potentially 60,000 people, based on racial profiling. There are only about 300 people with the protective status that were here.
For more, we're joined in Minneapolis by Jailani Hussein, Executive Director of CAIR. That's the Council on American Islamic Relations. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Jailani Hussein. If you can start off by responding to President Trump's comments, calling the Somali community garbage, and singling out Ilhan Omar, calling her garbage, as he said that they should leave the country. You were born in Somalia. You came to the United States as a child. Can you talk about the danger this puts you in when the President of the United States talks about an entire community in this way?
Well, I think it's extremely, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I think it's extremely disappointing. And especially, I think Americans across this country should be abhorred.
I'm not even being like, I'm not even being like Trump derangement syndrome when I say that, like, Trump smells like shit. He probably does smell like shit. He probably doesn't brush his teeth, which I need to be better at brushing my teeth, but dude wears dentures. He does not ever brush his teeth. His mouth is probably just a cesspool hole in his face. So talking to him is probably like hell. And he probably wears adult diapers and has a catheter and just like and old people can't smell very well, so it's possible that he is not even aware of how much he stinks.
You know, we understand why.
And he's the fucking president.
It's actually because of our success.
Come on, man.
Somali Americans have been in the United States now for more than 30 years. We came here partially because of our refugee status.
Putrid president.
And the doors were actually opened by George Bush Sr. And, you know, the fact that this attack is happening to this community and continues to happen, we believe is because of the fact that we feel the trifecta. We are a black immigrant, and we know that President Trump continues to attack black people, whether they're descendants of slaves here in the United States or African immigrants. We see the majority of the countries that have been banned are African. Also the fact of immigrants, and of course being a Muslim. And I think those trifectas continue to make it easy to scapegoat. We know that there are foreign entities that want, including Israel, as well as the Hindu extremists in this country, who want to reverse the course of what is actually taking place in this country, which is, for the first time, Republicans waking up to these wars, to these never-ending wars, and the carnage of what happened in Gaza. And so we know that that's an element as part of the reason why this community is being targeted.
You're saying because it's a largely Muslim community, Jailani?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, there's an effort to try to demonize Muslims. This has always been the case. If you demonize Muslims, then you can get away with killing Muslims abroad. This has always been the case from the Afghanistan war to the Iraq war. We know that. And I think many young Republicans and many, obviously, progressive Democrats and Democrats across this country, and perhaps the future of this country, do not want to have a government that spends majority of its time in wars of killing other people and not taking care of Americans here. I think that's at the center of it. However, it's been interesting to have these 100 plus ICE agents descend on our state. And so far what we've heard is literally them detaining U.S. citizens. I think that yesterday we learned that they've maybe only picked up 5 Somali Americans who are going through the immigration process.
I'm wondering if you could also comment on what happened in November. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott declaring your organization, the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, the country's largest Muslim civil rights group, a foreign terrorist organization. It's not even clear that he has the ability as a governor of a state to classify an organization in this way.
I think if it's the same pattern of behavior that we've seen, where Israeli first politicians are doing the bidding of Netanyahu. We know that CAIR has actually had a spy who had connections to the Netanyahu government who infiltrated one of our CAIR chapters. We are the largest civil rights organization. It is because of the fact of how effective we are in ensuring the rights of American Muslims and others that we become a target for these groups. And so, it's been widely condemned. And the reality is this is where they go. This is kind of the targeting that we have seen, and we expect that. And perhaps there'll be even more. But it's falling, I believe, on deaf ears because more and more people are reading now, more and more people are awake, and there's a younger generation of Americans I am really hopeful will not be duped by the same type of rhetoric that we have seen in the past. So you have the largest Somali American population in the United States in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, around 84,000 people, with approximately 73% of Somali immigrants being naturalized citizens. This is imperiling Republican candidates and political figures. I've seen people concerned about whether they will be elected. There are Somali Republicans and Democrats. I saw a father and business owner yesterday saying he voted for Trump. How does he talk to his children about Trump calling his children garbage? But if you can talk about the citizenship and President Trump threatening to take away, if this is even in his power, re-examine naturalized citizens? Yeah, I mean, these threats have been there. It's part of their plan. I know that we estimate about 58% or a little more than that of Somali Americans are actually born here. So we have a pretty young community, and about almost 80% actually. We have some higher numbers of those who are either lawful residents or majority being U.S. citizens. We've been here for 30 plus years. We have built ourselves to be a fabric of this great state of Minnesota, not only in the urban core, but in greater parts of the state. And so, yeah, this efforts to try to do that is interesting. But it is part of this effort to try to, again, target immigration in this country. And I believe it's not only racist, but it's a plan that is to kind of respond to that kind of white nationalist effort that we've heard for so much. To the other point politically, Somali Americans, just like any other community, are not monolithic. We have seen actually a sharp increase of Somali Americans supporting Republicans in the state of Minnesota, including President Trump. And there are many of them. Some have publicly declared that they are out of the Republican Party, and others are asking hard questions. And here's the interesting thing. The Republican leadership in the state of Minnesota understand what is happening. In fact, they are kind of right now silent and not choosing to come up and say, these our community, the Somali American community, and many who even voted for them are not garbage, and the president was out of line. Can you tell your own story, Jailani Hussein, how you came to the United States from Somalia? This is one thing that I think people don't understand. As an immigrant child or refugee child, nobody wants to leave home. I never, as a young child, ever imagined leaving anywhere. I remember living next to the airport, and I would see planes leave. And as a child, you might have wanted to get on a plane and see things, but home is always home. And because of that civil war, which I hope we get a chance sometime to talk about that, because people don't realize how United States foreign policy plays into destabilization, including my own country, because Somalia was part of the Cold War that the United States and Russia interfered with our own government and created us to have wars with our neighbors in Ethiopia. But I left Somalia and as a child, and I came here to Minnesota, and Minnesota. My father always says that we came to one of the coldest places, but we found people with warm hearts. And today, I'm as a Minnesotan as you can get. And there's something unique about Minnesota. Minnesota also has a large number of other immigrants, including folks from Laos, the Hmong population, and as well as a large other Latino and South American community. And it's interesting, it's starting to be really unique. And for those who have visited us here in the state of Minnesota would find that robust diversity that is growing in the heart of the Twin Cities. But Minnesota has not only embraced Somali community, but you start to see that our food and the things that we do are also part of that, the growth of the state. And so, I was just joking to reporters, a deer stand a couple of weeks ago, even though I didn't get a deer. And that's what it is. We when we come together and we live in this.
Okay, we don't need to glaze Minnesota this hard. Like, you should be able to live anywhere. Doesn't matter where.
Great country and try to make it even a better country. That is really the story of the immigrant community, and that's something that is not only hopeful, but in this moment we are really asking, especially Minnesotans and folks across the country, to speak up. And I know, and I've heard from Republicans, individuals, I've heard of so many people who are not only shocked and dismayed by what the president has said. And yesterday we had faith leaders who spoke up, and many other community members are speaking up. And yesterday we also called for a National Day of Action on Saturday, December 13th, for folks to speak up across this country, to stand with Somali Americans, but also other immigrants in this country. This is a native land, and other than the forced enslavement of African Americans, everyone else has really an immigrant story, and that's a story we need to tell. And I hope this message goes to Melania. I know she is an immigrant herself, and I think she in this moment could potentially speak to the president and maybe even present a different story to the president. Demonizing an entire community for the act of individuals is wrong.
Melania with her "I really don't care, do you" coat. Yeah, right. I'm gonna leave it there. This will give you nightmares? What?
Could some passengers have survived inside the Titanic after she sank? And if they did, what happened next? In this video, we'll uncover the terrifying fate of anyone trapped below.
See ya.
We first have to understand the unique way the Titanic went under, because how it broke apart holds the keys to whether anyone could have been alive. This ship was built with watertight compartments intended to separate seawater from the rest of the vessel if flooding began. But in reality, these areas weren't actually watertight. They had openings at the top. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, it tore open 5 compartments in the bow. Water flooded in, spilling from one compartment to the next, leaving the front of the ship heavy with water while the stern remained filled with air. As the bow sank deeper, the pressure was too much and the ship split in two. Nobody could have survived in the bow as it sank. It was completely flooded. But what about the stern? After the bow went under, the stern lifted upwards into the sky with its propellers fully visible. It was this way of sinking that made it possible for some to remain alive inside the ship. The stern was mostly sealed off, even after the ship tore apart, so it most likely contained trapped pockets of air in crew quarters, storage areas, and even some stairwells. These air volumes behaved like giant lungs, venting and shifting as the hull twisted. Of the 1,500 people who perished, it was likely people were still trapped in the stern when those air pockets formed. They'd be plunged into darkness, and every creak of the ship's frame would sound like it was coming from inside their own skulls. So it was possible that some survived after the ship sank beneath the surface. The question is how long those air pockets could have lasted, and whether it made survival more merciful or more cruel. The first and most grim possibility was that passengers trapped in the air pockets might have survived long enough to reach the sea floor. A horrifying thought, because the stern's plunge lasted 6 to 10 minutes, nearly 2.5 miles through total darkness. But the way the stern fell would make survival difficult. After breaking apart, the stern didn't sink cleanly. It twisted, rotated, and collapsed in on itself before hitting bottom in a blast of debris. The impact folded decks like paper, crushing anything still sealed inside. On the off chance any air pockets survived the entire descent, the final impact would have been annihilating. Entire rooms would have collapsed in milliseconds, killing anyone who survived before they even knew it happened. Thankfully, physics leaves almost no chance anyone made it that far down. But even surviving part of that descent would have been a nightmare on its own. Many air pockets would have flooded almost instantly. As pressure built, rivets loosened, seams split, and the Atlantic forced its way inside, swarming survivors. In those spaces, air rushed out in violent bursts as freezing water filled every corner. Survivors outside the ship reported seeing portholes burst as air escaped. For anyone still trapped in these areas, death came within seconds of the stern submerging. The cold and violent surge would have knocked the air from their lungs before they could take one last breath. But some air pockets were likely sealed off enough to keep the ocean out at least for a while, which raises the darker question. What happens when the water never reaches you? As the stern fell, pressure would have climbed meter by meter. Survivors would have waited in complete darkness as air compressed. Their ears popped, breathing tightened, and they listened to the ship twist around them. For a few hundred meters down, these pockets could have persisted, but between 30 seconds and a minute after the ship disappeared beneath the surface, lifeboat survivors reported hearing something horrifying, a distant roar beneath them. This was almost certainly the stern imploding. The steel of the stern would have yielded to crushing pressure of the Atlantic, and the trapped air pockets collapsed in milliseconds. Those inside would have experienced no sound and no warning, just instantaneous annihilation. This was the most plausible fate for those in the stern who survived the longest.